What's up, everybody? Let's talk about Walther PDPs. We've got a plethora of PDP setups here, whether it's a steel frame or, comped polymer frame PDP. We even have a suppressed Walther sitting here. But we get questions on these quite often.
Daily.
What do you do to your PDPs? So I think this should be pretty interesting because both of us, like Joel is going to do stuff that I don't do to my PDPs and vice versa.
You definitely do stuff to your guns that I will not do to mine.
Well, that's because mine are less gay.
Oh, all right. Well, there. Let's got that out of the box.
Let's talk about what do you do to your PDPs? So these two steel frames right here are yours. What things do you do to them specifically?
Let's talk about the big difference between ours.
Okay.
Are the guide rods.
Yeah.
We should talk about that.
Okay.
That's the biggest question I get. So, in my opinion, the Walther pistols are oversprung, whether it's the polymer guns or the metal guns. So, by what I mean by this, when the gun's recoiling, I can still get it to return to the point I want to hit, but in my wrist, it just feels sharper, like with the factory recoil spring. So I can get a good result and I can stack shots, but I feel in my wrist like the gun's snapping more.
Yeah.
So the guns have heavier springs. In my opinion, they need to be changed.
Yeah, and I get people that ask me about this all the time, like why would I have a lighter spring? So if you think about the factory spring having an 18-pound it's an 18-pound OEM spring in that, correct?
Feels like 30
I believe.
pound, but
it's heavy as shit, right? So if you think about it, the heavier the spring, the more that spring compresses into your hand, or the more pounds compress into your hand. So the heavier the spring, the more felt recoil you are going to feel when you fire the gun.
When it goes forward, it's pushing more, and when it stops, you're going to have more force shoving the slide forward.
For sure.
The other backhand of that. Yeah.
Yep. I use the long stroke guide rod and spring from ZR Tactical. The main difference in the long stroke is, what you guys will notice is, if you remove the slide from any of your 5-inch PDPs or 4.5-inch PDPs, you will see a plastic spacer underneath the slide. When you get your ZR Tactical long stroke guide rod and spring, you will remove that spacer, and then you can put in your long stroke guide rod.
We'll make you do some B-reel stuff to show this, but
yeah, for sure.
Basically, you could tell the difference. You have to take the striker out, which I find to be annoying.
It is.
Back plate comes off, striker comes out, and then your whole point is you're sliding this plastic piece all the way out the back of the slide because this piece is bottoming out on the inside of the frame, which is what's stopping it from recoiling. Without having that long stroke, the gun's able to cycle farther, so the slide travels a further distance.
Most people like a long stroke.
Okay.
So what you guys will notice immediately when you put the long stroke in is the gun essentially cycles further. So instead of stopping just right here,
start at slide lock.
Okay.
Put the gun at slide lock.
Here's slide lock.
And now how much further does it go?
Right about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, I would say.
And if you look in from the inside, you can see the ejector, you can see the trigger return spring, you can see a bunch of the parts. For this, starting at slide lock, you can see how much more the slide moves. And it's, I don't know, a 1/2 inch?
Yes.
A 1/4 inch, something like that. It's not much at all.
Yep.
And you don't see any of the parts, like the trigger return spring, any of the stuff in the back part of the slide. You don't have access to that either, which I don't care one way or the other, but it's just to give you a reference of how far the slide moves.
Right. The grips that you put on yours.
Well, let's talk about,
Yeah.
Let's talk about the feel with the gun, with the long stroke.
Yep.
So, in my opinion, having the regular recoil spring, this feels more, I like the 15-pound, just a ZR Tactical captive guide rod, but it feels more like every other gun I own.
Okay.
In the way that, if I shoot a Glock, if I want to shoot a CZ, if I shoot whatever, it's more or less, they all feel the same. When you put in that long stroke guide rod, it does feel foreign. To me, just because it feels more slushy. The slide itself is traveling farther than I'm used to, and it's soft, but it just feels different.
Yes. I think it feels softer because the thing never feels like it hits your hand. In other words, the slide just comes back and then just goes forward. It never does that into your hand. So I think some people might find it to be a little bit more pleasant, but I agree, like you said, it does feel a little bit more foreign than any of the other guns that you're going to pick up.
So if I use, I had one on it for, 500 rounds or so, and I can get to the point where I shot it pretty well. I shoot yours okay. I'm I'm a little bit autistic, and well, probably a lot of it, and I just don't like that it feels different from my other guns. And I like that the gun has a little bit more giddy up, so I feel like it's just like the dots always right back there for me waiting, and I don't have the sensation of ever feeling like I'm waiting on the gun or it being more sluggish, which in reality, if you watched it
It's
or
like
looked at a timer,
thing.
100%, it's
Yep.
like, yeah, the splits are, let's say you shoot 13s with either guns, where maybe I feel like I'm waiting on another one, or it feels
For sure.
less sharp, or I see the dot tracking a different way.
I agree.
But I think it's a personality thing more than a performance thing.
For sure. I think if you paired the long stroke guide rod and spring with, like, minor power factor ammo, this becomes a very, very soft shooting gun.
It does.
Which is kind of why I dig it quite a bit. It's very pleasant to shoot.
And in classes, we've done like the blind taste test where people want to try both guns. And I think probably more so they like the long stroke because it just feels softer.
Yeah, they're like, holy moly, that thing's really
Then once in
soft.
a while, somebody be like, yeah, that feels weird. I like the regular one. And it's just, it's a personality thing, or
Yeah.
just a preference.
I think the biggest thing, or maybe the most common thing that I've heard about it is like people go, well, hey, it feels like I'm waiting on the gun to come back down. And again, I think that's just a perception thing. I've really explored that with this, and it's like I can still shoot very quick, and I never feel like I'm waiting on it. It feels like the dot, basically, like the gun goes off and the dot is just right there ready to shoot again. But it does feel like the gun is cycling slower than yours. So again, I think it's just a perception thing.
Reality of which one you like. I think the ZR Tactical is just the way to go in one way or the other because it's captive.
Agreed.
They also make an uncaptive guide rods where I had to message Nick. I'm like, hey, is there some trick? Because you're like putting like a guide through where the spring's supposed to go. And you're kind of getting the spring started, and then almost like a slave pin, I suppose, is the way to explain it. But then got to get this little washer and got it all threaded through. Then if you don't, it flies out the top. I'm like, no, this isn't for me, dude. So I just like the captive. So I do the captive regular 15-pound. You do the long stroke, which I think is 13 or 15 is the weight.
I would recommend the captive. Like if you don't go with the long stroke, definitely get the captive one. I have the ones that aren't captive. I could get them in there,
and I'm giving them to you because I don't want them.
Right.
They're at home in a bag.
It's like the juice isn't worth it. Like if you can get it already captive, why are you getting one that isn't
100%.
captive?
Then they do make weights lighter, 13s or so. I don't like that just because I don't love cleaning guns. And if you get you get a full magazine, so it's like, let's say you're at 22 plus 1 or whatever you fit in your gun, you're all the way plussed up. Sometimes if you're chamber checking, you get that little bit where the slide doesn't just quite want to go all the way forward in the battery. And with this one, as you can see, if I release the slide, I pull it back just a little bit and release it, they always slingshot all the way forward. This gun, it's been shot for the last couple weeks a lot. No clean, no oil added since I've even left my house for this trip, and it still just snaps back into battery. So you need to have at least enough spring pressure that it completely closes without any assistance, in my opinion.
I'll say this too, like I've explored basically the gamut with PDPs just because I've been shooting them from the very beginning, but I've tried the 13-pound springs, and the problems that I had with them, like specifically maybe at like a match, right? If I'm shooting around a barrel or something, and then you bring the gun in, and then you go to run somewhere and do that pump thing, it makes me feel faster anyway. If you do something like that, what I was noticing was it would knock the gun out of battery, and it would just sit there like this, and then I'd bring the gun up to shoot, and I can't shoot, and I'd have to bump it back in.
Yeah,
but
Magpul Dynamics says anyway, you should tip the back of the slide.
Hit it like that, or one-handed, smack it off your sternum because that won't hurt. But yeah, that's what I found out with the 13-pound spring. So I wouldn't go under 15. I think 15 or above. I also think the long stroke is 14, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe.
I think you can get away with it just because it's longer, maybe, and there's more spring. But yeah, this one doesn't have that issue where it knocks out a battery. And I'm almost certain that this is a 14.
Cool. Let's talk about grips.
Grips.
So there's a bunch of different options. If you're gonna do aftermarket, I think Lock makes the best choice. They've got a bunch of different styles and flavors.
Yep.
I actually just have the factory grips that come on the gun with silicone carbide added. That's been my favorite. So I'll talk crazy before Nick gets to his gun. Some of these, this one's I think maybe sanded down a little bit, but yeah, especially the bogey style. These will be from Lock. Thanks. When I grip the gun and then my support hand really clamps down hard, I get a feeling on my fingertips. So of my fingertips to my strong hand, just maybe it's the length of my fingers, whatever, where it hits the frame and pinch down, it hurts. And I'll end up where I can take my hand off the gun and I'll see, you know, I can still see the
Yep.
little waffle patterns, and then on my fingertips it'll just get calloused and get very sore. So anyway, I went with a silicone carbide route a couple years ago, and I've just stuck with it since. So to oversimplify, what it is just taking painter's tape, lining out anywhere I don't want to have the silicone carbide, putting JB Weld. Well, I have friends. My friend John's good at doing these for me. But putting JB Weld over the frame where I want it to be just a thin coat, just the regular stuff, just like with his finger. Then the carbide comes in it looks like glitter. It's just loose grit, basically. Sprinkle that over the top of it. Just tap it down just a little bit, not so much that it sinks into the carbide, but enough that it sticks. Let it sit for 15 minutes or so. Take the tape off, and then just anywhere else it's missing, kind of shake it out and just add more carbide in, let it sit for 24 hours, and then you're good to go. So basically what this ends up with is a skateboard tape-like feel. So I feel like I get really good traction, but there's nowhere that's going to bite up my hands or cause me to bleed. Like this, you can tell I've shot this gun a lot. It'll start to get filled in with dead skin. I know everyone doesn't love like the thought of that, but if you just use a nylon, a nylon brush, or even a brass brush, you can just knock that out. We'll just bump out the dead skin, and then you'll be good to go again. One thing I do that's a little bit different is I tape off the top part of the back strap, because I feel like when I'm getting a draw on the gun, if I grip it a little bit low, I want to be able to adjust my hand. And if I get it all the way up, basically whatever you get off your draw is what you get. There's no room to kind of move your hand at all.
Right.
So anyway, I do these on the polymer guns also, which is permanent, on the polymer PDPs. This one, it's the removable grip panel, so if you mess up or don't like it, you can always get rid of it. But anyway, that's what I do for grips. This has been like very good for me. This is my go-to. And it's cool because it's the factory grips. I don't have to buy anything.
Yeah, I kind of have all of the above here, where I have some lock grips. These are the bogeys. These are going to be your most aggressive. I will say that, like the other day when we were shooting like duty ammo.
Yes. Your hands were like
right here. It was all red and starting to get sore by the end. That is like a callous spot on my hand though. So maybe I don't feel it as much as you, but yeah, these are the bogeys. The other ones that I like, I think.
It's for the V, isn't it? It's like
Veloch or
something like that.
Yeah, I speak Appalachian American. I don't know. So yeah, these I really like. They're not as grippy as the bogeys are going to be, but it is grippy just enough. These are also the palm swells as well as the bogeys. So I really dig the palm swell grips from Lock, and the reason that I dig them is because it adds more real estate to the side of the gun where my support hand goes onto. So it gives me more real estate. I think also too, one of the coolest things about doing the silicone carbide, kind of like this one here, like this one's my PDP that I've done silicone carbide on. If you're not a fan of the lock grips, if you do silicone carbide, one thing that is really neat that you can do is actually build up the grip. So if you have really large hands, like we recently did a class this past weekend, this one dude had super large hands, and I was like, man, I would just build that grip up with silicone carbide and basically make it fit you. And you could totally do that. Like this one actually fits my hand, I would say, better than the others, just because the grip is a little bit thicker, leaves more room for my support hand. And yeah, I mean, I dig it quite a bit.
Yeah. What else? I think red dot plates are the other thing that triggers people. Should we talk about dots and plates?
Yeah, sure. I've had quite a bit of experience with dots and plates. I've had, several break. They're usually, well, maybe we won't say the name. It starts with a C, ends with an S. I've had a lot of those plates actually break, like the bosses actually breaking on those things.
Little T-posts, like the wings break off, or the screw that attaches the T-posts. Yeah. So like I'll take off the plate and I'll have the wings for the posts underneath, but the rest is just gone and lost off in the wilderness.
Yeah, I've also had it to where I bought a 509T plate for this optic here from that same exact company, mounted the 509T, and there was like daylight. I emailed them and was like, hey, there's daylight, and they were like, that's normal. I was like, okay. Probably not. But so I stay away from those just because, again, I've had really bad luck. I don't know them personally, but I've had very bad luck with them.
I had a bad experience, and I sent them a nice email, and they asked me if I watched all the videos on their site, and then they told me that was the problem, was that I didn't watch a video to know what screws were for what that weren't labeled in the bag. I was just like, okay, I was gonna like stop replying to this and buy something else.
Yeah, I typically lean towards the Arise manufacturing plates these days for Walther PDPs. The cool thing that I like about the Arise manufacturing plates, number one, Jordan. I'm a big fan of Jordan, who owns Arise Manufacturing.
He's super nice.
He's a great guy. Does he send these plates for free to both of us? Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Even if he didn't, I would still buy the Arise Manufacturing plates. Best thing about these plates is, I don't know about your experience, I'm sure it's probably the same, but they fit so tight. So like when I put the plate on, I'll set it on there, and then you have to take like a little mallet and kind of tap it into
use
place.
a claw hammer, but yes.
A roofing hammer.
No,
Correct.
That's what I have. Just lightly tap it. Give a little taparoo.
Send a video of that to Jordan.
You'll love it.
So yeah, you usually have to tap it into place. The great thing about that is I know that thing is going to stay zeroed all the time. I've also tried this before where I set the plate in, don't screw it on, and then I set the optic on it without any screws, fire around, and the thing actually stayed together. Obviously not recommended, but I just want to see like how tight it actually was. So the plate fits very, very tight to the gun. And I'm sure this could be possibly something that is gun related as well. You know, maybe if you have a different gun manufacturer.
Different recoil spring, whatever.
Well, different tolerances inside of where the plate fits. Maybe yours would, maybe you would have a different experience. But with the Walthers, for me, like all of them fit very, very tight. And the optics also fit very tight onto the plates where, like, for me, I have to like push them onto the.
That's why I grab this one. Like normally, I'll put the optic on top, and then I'll kind of start it just by pushing on the hood and kind of the back half of the battery is.
I just do this.
Oh.
And then knock it into place.
I'm actually more gentle in this case then. So I'll like get them started, and then make sure I've got everything lined up, and then just kind of push the rest of the way. And yeah, if I need to, then I could use the claw hammer or whatever, or something softer. But yeah, to make sure I don't have any daylight between the optic and the plate.
Yep.
But I like that. Yes, it fits so tightly that. Let's be real. Some of the other plates, if you set the optic on there, it's got a lot of wiggle where you could just wiggle and move the plate, like the optic back around. So
yeah, and it's like, man, when they do that, number one, would you want to carry a gun where the optic kind of moves around without the screws? I mean, not even carry, but like, would you want to go shoot a match with that? You know, would the gun hold? Would that plate hold zero?
Sure.
And the answer is probably no. Like, I wouldn't want to trust my life to something like that. So I want my stuff fitting very, very tightly. This way, I have no worries about the gun holding zero or anything like that. There's a couple different options here from Arise Manufacturing. I think the one that is probably going to be, I would say our favorite one is going to be the Lowrider plate. These actually just got released recently as of November 2024. And the cool thing about the Lowrider plate is it's just a whole lot thinner than the other ones. So it makes the optics sit a little bit lower. The other plates that you're going to see are the Aegis, and the Aegis plates, what you guys will notice is the plate is a little bit thicker, and then there's screw holes, and they're drilled and tapped on each side, 2 holes on each side. What that allows you to do is add a optic shroud around the optic. Offers you guys a little bit more protection. Some of you guys may feel like you need it, maybe you don't. It is kind of a nice option. I will say, like if the gun is maybe in a holster, maybe you're doing some rifle stuff, drop down the prone, maybe the gun smacks, the ground or whatever, it is going to offer a little bit more protection over the optic.
I'll be real. I don't do anything cool other than like shoot guns in dirt pits. So for me, it's not a product I really need. Like I don't really care one way or the other. I don't think it helps or hurts. Looking through the optic, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of a metal like outline you can see on the outside window, but it's not like it makes the optic that much bigger or smaller. So I personally don't really care one way or the other. I have both on guns just because, but if it makes sense for what you're doing with the gun, cool. If not, the plate's the thing I really care about.
Yep.
And then, like what you said, so a little bit behind the scenes, he'd sent us the Aegis, how you pronounce it, I think? Aegis. Sue.
The A is silent.
Oh, okay. With the shroud, use those for a while. I was like, hey, I like this, but could you make your plates thinner? And just by the nature of needing to have the screw holes in the plate, that plate's going to be just a tick taller. So I'm like, hey, could you make me a thinner plate? He's like, oh, Nick's already been talking to me about that also. I'm like, well, good. Great minds think alike. So anyway, that's where this Lowrider plate actually came about. It was because like I want to run like the Arise plates because I like the way they fit and stuff. Like, all the other things that come along with it, I just didn't need. Like if I don't want the shroud, I want the plate just to be a tick lower, which I don't even know how to measure what it would be. I mean, you need to use a caliper.
It's about half the size of the Aegis plate.
Yeah.
I would say. Half the thickness.
A third, maybe a third. But whatever. So anyway, it's just going to make your optics sit just a tick lower. Does it matter between the two? Probably not. But if you're just like a competition shooting person, performance shooter, you don't care about the like ever running a shroud, this is just the one to get. And if you think you might want the shroud, you can always get the plate that's already drilled and tapped, and then if you want it in the future, you got it. So
Yeah, and you can move these shrouds around too. They're all going to be modular. So every one of these plates, any one of the Aegis plates that have the holes drilled and tapped, you can move the shrouds from plate to plate, and
and they're
they
model
will work.
specific for the Optic.
Correct, correct. So I don't know. Maybe you're a cop and you want a little bit extra protection with your Optic, and you throw that on there, or whatever the case may be. It does offer a little bit more protection around the Optic.
Yeah.
So if you find that to be important, I would say go for it.
I think the last part to talk about, well, two things left, but base pad, like magazines, guts, base pads.
Yep.
Capacity, and what do you like?
So my favorites are the ZR tactical ones, which are these, or the Henning Group base pads. The one thing that I would stay away from is these. Who makes the gamer?
Those Rune or MBX are the two.
Nope. CRSG, something like that.
I'll tell you what to use.
Gamer followers.
Okay.
It just so what it does is it offers you a little bit more capacity. I think like one or two more bullets in it, which is nice. But what I have found is the bullets somehow get past this follower and will go down into the magazine itself. That becomes a real pain in the ass because then I need to remove the base plate to get that bullet out of there. So like I would just rather have, a regular follower, kind of like these two here. You get 22 rounds plus one in the chamber, totally fine by me. Like I would be comfortable shooting a match with that.
I agree. I do have some of the gamer followers. If you want the gamer stuff, it's MBX Ultra is the one. It's 23 plus one, so one more round. These are 22 plus one. Those work well. I've used them a lot, but I have them in a separate set of mags that just get set aside for matches, and it's like once in a while in a match, I'll be like, I really want the one extra round. It's not even something I use a lot. It's just I have 3 of them I take with me to matches in case I want them. I wouldn't put a part of my practice rotation. The other bad part is they don't lock the slide open.
Right.
But I do have a batch of them that I've tested a lot. The MBX stuff is good to go, but for like most applications, it's not needed. I like the blue Walther follower just because it locks the slide open. And then, do you have a preference on spring?
No. So actually, man, I should have came more prepared for this shit.
I have the Taylor.
These came with these followers.
I have Taylor Freelance followers because I used their base pads for a while. So I've got, their springs. So I use the Taylor Freelance mag springs, and then I just got rid of the base pad and switched to the Hennings.
The cool thing about the Henning is the way that it comes off. So like if you want to clean your magazine, that little detent in the front, you just basically push it down. The thing slides off. It's toolless, which is super freaking nice. Some of these matches, I know like the one that I shoot, sometimes it gets a little muddy. The one bay has like really fine sand in it. Drop a magazine in that fine sand. Like you're gonna want to get that out of there before the next stage. So that comes in really handy where you could just pop that off, clean the magazine real quick, and then you're good to go. Whereas, something like this one, the ZR base pad, which is nice, but the way that it attaches, it has these little tiny screws. So you do need to have a very, very tiny Allen wrench to get those little screws out of there. This way you can get the base plate off. If that's not a big issue to you, then, go for the ZR Tactical. These will work for you.
Even if you're just shooting one reload ones, man, your mags are going to get dirty.
But
if you shoot any form of matches and anything you want to do well at, as a rule of thumb, once your magazine goes in the sand or gravel, you probably should take it apart and brush it. And like what Nick said, the cool part about these is in the front, it's just a little spring-loaded plunger. We'll get closer video, but basically you just push down the little plunger, and that's all it is. Just the base pad just slides off. So it's super simple. You can take the spring and the guts out, change anything you need to change, or clean anything, or wipe off the follower or whatever. And it's just easy. It's that simple. And then all you're doing is just lining the spring back up, getting it set up in the groove, push it forward, and it clicks. It's like I don't even need like any extra takes or anything like that, and it's good to go just in one chop. It's also important that the little detent is captive, so it's nothing you could possibly lose. And I've never had one fall out, and I've got a lot of Henning stuff. I use these for Glocks. I like the Glock base pads also. But anyway, Henning, I like him as a person, and his products are really good. The other flip side to that is the Terran base pads.
that one's pretty precious.
Yeah. So these have the same type of idea, only you have to push on the tab. So you push on this from the top, then it'll come out on the bottom, and you could slide it on and off. I had some of these for the Walther, and I had, bad experiences with them. I ended up, the pin would always come loose. So then while I was shooting, at some point the magazine would do the just ejecto-ceto, and the base pad would go somewhere else, and the rounds would go on the ground.
Yep.
So the instructions say not to do it, which is why I did it, but there's a little set screw on the side that you can tighten up, which adjusts the resistance of the pin.
Yep.
So I adjusted that down as tight as I thought I could without stripping or breaking anything.
What I did. I could dug that thing into place.
I pushed on it a little bit. I'm like, yep, you did the same thing, which made it pretty much permanent, but that at least kept the base pad in place.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, for at least the Walther, these are not my favorite. For Glocks, I know they don't back out, but maybe it's not. Maybe the Walther has more shock or whatever. But
I don't know. I'm typically not a fan of little tiny screws like that. Little tiny screws on base pads, whether it's this one or whether it's the ZR with the little tiny screws. These screws will inevitably fucking come loose.
Yeah.
And typically what happens is you're like, fuck, it came loose, and then you put like blue Loctite on it, and then you screw it down even more. That thing is in there for good.
Yeah, and then you round out the screw.
You're going to round out the screw. That base pad is on there forever. So, you know, it's kind of a con of these. I think this pin design is pretty gay. I would say the Henning is far superior to that pin with that little tiny set screw in there.
Yeah, I mean, the Henning stuff is pretty choice.
Yep.
The other part, not to overlook, is the contour of the pad. So I like that this base pad's thinner. I use the tailors a little bit, and I dislike those. Well, they're less expensive, but just because the base pad was a lot wider, and drawing it off the belt, it was just a lot more to hang on to. And I like how thin and easy the Henning pads are to get a hold of. And then they have a little bit of traction on the side. So if you're doing a lot of mag changes, a lot of gun handling stuff, or just admin loading and unloading, these just feel better in the hand to me anyway.
I agree.
So the Henning one's my choice. And then if you like numbering stuff, he has little dots in the bottom of them, so you could pick like what sequence you want to fill in the dots. Or
I would recommend doing that.
I like that. Or some people just use like a Sharpie on the back of the mag body, or on the bottom just to put like 1, 2, 3, 4, or make a label maker, make a sticker like NY1 for Nick Young, whatever you want to do. But anyway. A minor tangent. I think labeling magazines is a good idea, even if you use them for training, because if you have a malfunction, then I'll just be like, what magazine? It's like, oh, it's magazine number 3 again.
Yep.
This one's either a practice magazine, something's wrong with it, or it goes in the trash can.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a good idea, because then if you have a magazine that has an issue, you can at least keep track of it, and you don't. It's just a nightmare to sort out otherwise. If you don't know, like if one magazine's having a problem, but you don't know which one it is.
I agree.
So
it's a good thing to do.
All right, let's talk about the ugly stuff.
The ugly stuff.
What have we broken? We both shoot quite a bit.
So I've actually broken a couple things, but only on the polymer frame PDPs. I've never broken anything on a steel frame. This particular steel frame I've had since before they came out. This one has to have somewhere around 60 to 65K on it, and I've not only never broken anything, but I've never replaced anything. It has all the exact same springs and all of that shit on the inside. Now, a sample size of 1. But I have not broken anything on this pistol. The polymer frames, I've broken the pin that goes in the front. So that little pin right here, I have broken one of those in half. To me, when I did that, it was like, it's kind of no big deal. I just replaced the pin. And then, we were chatting about it the other day, and you had a really good point. Like, maybe that's designed to break instead of breaking other things. Maybe that's like a fail-safe, so to speak.
Yeah,
but
very well could be.
Yeah, and then the only other thing that I broke in is the tip of a striker, and that was in a Q5 match, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so.
Okay. I had a gun that I bought used, so I don't know how much had been shot, and I was dry firing it a lot, but it was a polymer frame gun, and the same thing, just the tip of the striker broke off, and I just emailed Walther customer service. It was like, yeah, send us your old one, we'll send you a new one. I'm like, okay, cool. Like 2 weeks later, I had one. So I broke one of those, and that was on a polymer gun that, again, I didn't buy new. And then on a metal gun, I did break basically the same pin Nick was talking about, which is, I did remove the slide. It's the pin that goes through that holds the locking block. So it's under the slide stop. It's just a little pin that goes through, which looks
very similar to that one.
It looks the same as this little dude, basically. And like, honestly, full disclosure, I was shooting, through that gun specifically, a lot of hot ammo. It's like 115 grain plus P plus, like 150 power factor ammo that I had a lot in supply, and I was shooting a lot of. So anyway, like, I'm shooting a lot hotter ammo through that gun than most people would buy at the store. So maybe that was what accelerated the parts where, I don't know, it just kind of chewed at the pin.
Yeah.
and that ended up causing stoppages, and so I just same deal. Emailed Walther and I had a new pin, and that was that. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, I
that's
know
pretty minor.
people love to get bent out of shape and post stuff online and stuff. So like for me, as someone who comes out, so just to give you an idea of like how a range day would go, like we're gonna shoot here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like how my range day goes, I already have mags full when I get down here. I'm probably gonna shoot 400 to 500 rounds in maybe an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. I get a lot of work in very, very quickly. These guns get hot and they get ran like very, very hard. I'm typically not one to clean a whole lot either.
I can tell.
When it's dry, all I do is stick more lube on it. So to me, it's like when a pin breaks or something like that, it's like, that's like normal maintenance type of shit. Like I'm just gonna replace this thing. I've had stuff on back when I used to run 320s. Like I've had stuff on those things break, and it was like, I'm not even gonna post this online because it's just like this is just normal shit. Like
Sure.
I come out here and bang on these things, and I just kind of expect little things to happen. Now, if you're having like massive issues, I would say, well, that's probably a problem and it needs to get sent back. But like, little things here or there, whether it's, your gun, optics, whatever, like I fully expect, like even optics, like I fully expect optics not to last forever.
True.
Like I know they're going to break and I know I'm going to send them back and get fixed.
I
Like
agree.
it's just a normal thing.
My last tangent, I guess, like, one is none, two is one. If you have the means, I highly recommend it, having a backup gun. Kind of, if you're serious about shooting competition or if funding allows, having two does make sense. Like these two guns I brought, they're identical in every way. The only difference you could tell the difference as far as internally, like, would just be the serial numbers, and they have different optics on them. Otherwise, they're exactly the same in every way, as close as I can get them together. So I have a favorite gun that just gets shot for matches or like class demos. The other one I put all my training on. Then go figure, like the pin I was telling you about broke. That was the training gun that's got a lot of ammunition that I was not paying for, got shot through it, and at some point, the gun's going to give up. If you use any of your equipment enough, they're going to give up. In that same practice gun, I also had the spring for the ZR Tactical Captive Guide Rod. It just it started to get soft, to where, again, this was after a lot of that hot ammo. It just wasn't quite going all the way forward into batteries. Like, okay, cool. So I just got another sling or another spring. They have a little rebuild kit. You just pull out the little, it's like a little cotter pin, kind of, or a little guide that goes along the top of it. Just pull that thing off, put a new spring on it, snap the little lock ring back in place, put it back in the gun. Like, yeah, it's a spring and it wore out. It's like,
yeah, and that stuff to me, like if you're serious about training, right? Maybe you have the ability to buy, a backup or and a match gun or whatever. The other things that you guys should be buying: extra springs, extra pins, like any of these little tiny parts that may break over time just from use. I would have a plethora of that shit sitting around. If you look at springs specifically, what are you going to pay for a spring? $7 for a recoil spring. It's like, man, why not have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 if you're like pretty
not
serious
as
about it.
crazy as you. How about this? Just have one of extra I'll call parts consumables. So what would make sense to have? Maybe an extra extractor spring, a recoil spring. If you do the lock, they sell like a rebuild kit where it's got a little tool that helps you change out the little lock ring and change the kit. So like maybe you have a couple extra like screws. So you probably have invested $20 or $30, maybe 40 after shipping. It just gives you one of extra part, and then if you have an issue, at least that night at your house, you could hopefully diagnose whatever went wrong and just change out the part.
Yeah, and I mean, it would make it very easy, like we see people in classes all the time. I know I do, like, hey, their gun went down, and if they don't have that stuff to fix it, it's like, hey, can I borrow someone else's gun?
Sure.
And it's like, man, if you just had that one cheap part there to fix it, like you could be back up and running and into the class that you paid your hard-earned money for.
Sure.
So.
Cool.
All right.
I think this one okay.
That's what we got on Walther PDPs. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comment box below. As always, happy to answer them for you.
Boom.
Bam. Bingo, bango.